When the pursuit of viral fame collides with deadly risks, the consequences are swift and irreversible. These 6 influencers paid the ultimate price chasing the perfect shot, the most daring stunt, or the next viral moment. Each death a stark reminder that no amount of likes, views, or engagement is worth a human life. It was June 14, 2015, when 23-year-old Claire Maddox arrived at a popular desert overlook in northern Arizona, chasing the perfect shot for her biggest payday yet. Claire had signed a paid partnership requiring a dramatic hero image with an uninterrupted horizon by Sunday noon. A substantial bonus and timed giveaway depended on hitting engagement targets within 24 hours. Claire was energetic and fiercely ambitious, always pushing boundaries to stand out. She traveled with Eli, a 26-year-old videographer known for meticulous compositions, and Nia, a 24-year-old outdoor guide whose cautious nature often clashed with Claire's risk-taking instincts. The temperature had climbed to 96 degrees, with wind gusts between 10 and 18 miles per hour. Posted signs warned visitors to stay back from the unstable edge. Claire and her team scouted the main viewpoint, but realized warning placards and tourists would appear in every frame. A campaign representative had been explicit: deliver a cliff-clean look with nothing but sky and stone. They moved to an unmaintained spur roughly 2 to 3 feet beyond the established path. Nia pointed out visible micro-sloughing along the edge and recommended staying farther back, but Eli had already positioned his tripod about 5 feet from the rim. The campaign team sent another text urging them to edge 1 to 2 feet closer for symmetry. In reality, the message came through Claire's social media manager, who relayed the brand's feedback in real time, a detail that only added to the mounting pressure. Multiple test shots were rejected because a warning sign kept appearing in frame. A campaign representative messaged again, emphasizing the need for one clean pass. Claire, wearing smooth-soled fashion sandals, stepped onto a thin limestone lip extending roughly 2 feet over open air. Eli called for a slow pan and a 3-count lean toward the gorge. A secondary phone showed live engagement numbers and a countdown for the giveaway. An 18-mile-per-hour gust hit just as Claire extended her 40-inch selfie stick to full length. Her day pack swung outward, shifting her center of mass forward by about 8 inches. Her left sandal skidded on dusty calcite. A 6-inch rock chip broke free beneath her right foot. Nia told her to step back, but a new text from the campaign team appeared on the monitor. Claire held her position for the pan. Her torso tipped past 45 degrees and she went over the rim. She fell approximately 25 feet and struck a protruding ledge chest first, fracturing multiple ribs and severely contusing both lungs. She then plummeted an additional 65 feet into a shaded pour-off pool, hitting the water at an estimated 45 to 50 miles per hour. Witnesses observed brief agonal respirations as she surfaced, then watched her drift face down toward a rock shelf. Nia immediately called for emergency help. Eli descended a steep goat trail while a seasonal worker climbed down with a throw bag. Eli reached Claire first, found no carotid pulse, and began chest compressions. An automated external defibrillator arrived but advised no shock. CPR continued until an air ambulance landed. Claire was pronounced deceased at the scene. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt chest trauma followed by drowning due to aspiration. The scheduled giveaway was removed and monetization was disabled. The bonus payment was canceled. Land managers installed additional warning panels. A small cairn appeared roughly 30 feet back from the rim, placed by those who wanted to remember what happens when content deadlines override common sense. It was September 3rd, 2016, when 25-year-old Dustin Reynolds decided to film what he called the ultimate urban adrenaline teaser along an industrial rail corridor in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Dustin had built a modest following, documenting high-risk stunts in abandoned spaces and active transit zones, always chasing that next viral moment. This afternoon, he planned to capture footage of himself train surfing atop a moving boxcar. Dustin was bold and impulsive, the kind of creator who thrived on the edge and dismissed warnings as obstacles to content. He arrived with DeAndre, a 28-year-old transit worker who was pragmatic and understood the mechanical dangers of rail environments, and Lila, a 22-year-old aspiring videographer eager to capture dramatic footage. The weather was clear at 78 degrees, but the location was far from safe. The corridor was marked with no trespassing signs, and the tracks ahead passed beneath a low industrial bridge with an approximate clearance of about 20 feet. low enough that even a kneeling posture could prove fatal. DeAndre pointed out the overhead structure and strongly advised Dustin to stay flat against the roof. The initial plan was to remain prone to avoid clearance issues, but Dustin grew frustrated with how the footage looked and decided to kneel upright for a more dramatic visual. Dustin climbed the side ladder of a stationary boxcar and positioned himself near the center seam of the roof. Lila set up on a service path roughly 25 feet away. The train began moving, accelerating to between 35 and 40 miles per hour. Dustin transitioned from prone to a high kneel, raising his torso approximately 18 to 24 inches above the roof line. The low rail bridge loomed ahead faster than Dustin anticipated. A horn blast sounded from a nearby track worker. A passing delivery cyclist also shouted a warning. Dustin attempted to duck at the last moment, but his upper body remained well above the safe clearance profile. The bridge edge struck him directly in the head and upper neck with devastating force. He collapsed instantly onto the roof, his body going limp. The impact caused him to slide approximately 6 to 8 feet across the roof ballast before coming to rest. There was no purposeful movement afterward. Lila immediately called for emergency help. DeAndre sprinted along the service path searching for an access ladder. The train crew initiated an emergency stop, halting roughly 4/10 of a mile down the line. Crew members climbed onto the roof and found Dustin unresponsive with no breathing and no carotid pulse. One crew member began chest compressions, while another coordinated with dispatchers. Emergency medical services staged nearby, but were delayed due to rail safety protocols requiring track protection confirmation. Once cleared, paramedics ascended with a backboard and airway equipment. They attempted to secure an airway, but craniocervical disruption made it extremely difficult. Resuscitation continued as they moved Dustin down and transferred him to the ambulance. Despite prolonged efforts, Dustin was pronounced deceased shortly after. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be catastrophic craniocervical blunt force trauma with high cervical spinal injury. The rail operator increased patrols and installed deterrent fencing at trespass hotspots. Lila provided footage to investigators. DeAndre submitted a technical statement on clearance hazards. Local advocates produced a rail trespass public service announcement using anonymized clips. The message was clear. Trains and their infrastructure are not playgrounds, and ignoring that reality can be immediate and irreversible. It was December 10th, 2017, when 26-year-old Spencer Rowe stepped onto a small stage at a pop-up food event space in Nashville, Tennessee, ready to live stream what he believed would be his most entertaining challenge yet. Spencer had built a loyal audience through eating challenges and food stunts that pushed the limits of speed and volume. This evening, he planned to tackle a timed steak and slider challenge with a live audience giveaway. Spencer was charismatic and competitive, feeding off crowd energy and never backing down. Joining him were Marco, a 34-year-old chef with little experience managing speed-eating safety risks, and Taryn, a 29-year-old event moderator skilled at hyping up crowds. Sitting in the audience was Owen, a 27-year-old student training to become an emergency medical responder. The venue was packed with 60 to 80 attendees. A basic first aid kit sat behind the stage, but there was no dedicated medical staff. The challenge consisted of dense bread and beef sliders and thick sirloin steak strips, with a strict 5-minute time limit. Taryn encouraged competitors to stack items together for visual impact and emphasized that cutting food into smaller bites would slow them down. A camera rig captured every angle, while a tablet displayed the live stream chat. The sliders were pre-assembled with dense buns that compressed easily. The timer started, and Spencer immediately began stacking his food. He combined 2 sliders with a 3 to 4 ounce steak strip, creating a towering bite roughly 2.5 to 3 inches tall. He took the oversized bite and attempted a rapid swallow. Almost immediately, his hand moved to his throat. He tried to cough, but the coughs were weak and ineffective. The universal choking signal was clear. Taryn called for help. Staff immediately dialed emergency services. Several audience members rushed forward, one attempting firm back slaps and another trying to hand him water. Frantic but ineffective responses typical in choking emergencies. Spencer tried to drink water, but the liquid refluxed visibly, indicating complete airway obstruction. Owen recognized the signs instantly and moved quickly to the stage. He positioned himself behind Spencer and delivered abdominal thrusts repeatedly, feeling slight movement but achieving no expulsion. Spencer's lips began to turn dusky blue. His knees buckled and he collapsed to the floor. completely unresponsive. Owen immediately began chest compressions and periodically checked the airway, but the obstruction remained lodged and unreachable. Emergency medical services arrived approximately 5 minutes later. A paramedic used a laryngoscope to visualize the airway and identified a compacted bread and meat bolus. Using magill forceps, the paramedic extracted the obstruction. An advanced airway was placed, and multiple cycles of cardiopulmonary resuscitation were delivered. Despite these efforts, there was no return of spontaneous circulation. The live stream was terminated. Staff cleared the aisles and directed attendees outside. Spencer was transported to the hospital, where he was pronounced deceased shortly after arrival. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be asphyxia from complete airway obstruction by a food bolus. Event organizers implemented sweeping changes, requiring mandatory bite-sized guidance, chew time rules, and on-site medical coverage. Marco shifted away from speed-based challenges, pivoting to exhibitions emphasizing technique and safety. The venue posted an emergency response flowchart and a memorial plaque. Spencer's death became a sobering reminder that entertainment should never come at the cost of basic safety. It was March 28, 2015, when 24-year-old Julia Hart climbed onto the rooftop of a former warehouse in downtown Los Angeles, California, determined to capture the perfect parkour sequence for her growing channel. Julia had spent 18 months documenting urban freerunning, building a dedicated audience that appreciated her technical skill and fearless approach. This afternoon, she planned to film a sequence featuring a 12-foot gap jump near vintage skylights. Julia was athletic and confident, known for precise movements and calculated risk-taking. Joining her were Priya, a 25-year-old photographer, Matteo, a 31-year-old building superintendent who was cautious, and Leo, a 22-year-old trainee freerunner. The weather was cool at 61 degrees, but light drizzle had begun to fall, leaving patches of slick tar across the rooftop. The skylights were original installations from the 1970s with visible crazing. More critically, they had no protective screens or guardrails. Matteo had been explicit in his warnings, telling the group to stay away from the glass entirely. Julia wore lightweight trainers and fingerless gloves. Tape marks indicated an 18-foot run-up. Leo had tested one skylight corner, and the panel had flexed noticeably. A faint cracking sound followed, but Leo brushed it off as surface noise, an ominous sign of internal stress in the aged acrylic. The plan was to vault near the frames without making contact with the glass. The first 2 takes went smoothly. Julia cleared the 12-foot gap cleanly both times. For the third take, she decided to add a mid-air twist. To achieve the rotation, she increased her approach speed. The wet conditions became a factor at the worst moment. As Julia planted her right foot for the final push-off, the slick tar reduced her traction. The foot slipped slightly, altering her trajectory by 8 to 12 inches. Instead of landing on solid roof deck, her left foot came down directly onto a skylight frame. The concentrated load transferred through the brittle acrylic panel beneath. The panel failed instantly. Julia fell feet first through the opening, dropping approximately 40 feet to the concrete floor below. She was impacted on her left side and back, producing severe thoracic trauma. The chest-mounted camera broke free. There was no movement after she landed. Priya immediately called for emergency help. Matteo ran to unlock the interior access door. Leo searched for an interior stairwell. When they reached the floor below, they found Julia lying motionless. Shallow respirations were present initially but diminished rapidly. Pulses became undetectable. Matteo began chest compressions following dispatcher instructions. An automated external defibrillator was retrieved, but had not arrived before paramedics reached the scene. Paramedics arrived within 7 minutes and immediately initiated advanced life support. A cardiac monitor showed brief electrical activity, but it was quickly lost. Despite aggressive resuscitation, there was no return of spontaneous circulation. Julia was pronounced deceased shortly after. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma with severe chest and spinal injuries from a fall through an unprotected roof opening. The building owner replaced all aging skylights and installed protective screens and guardrails. Rooftop access was restricted pending safety upgrades. The parkour community issued updated guidance, emphasizing the dangers of wet surface traction and avoiding rooftops with unprotected skylights. A memorial mural honoring Julia was painted on a nearby legal art wall. Julia's death underscored a harsh reality. No amount of talent can compensate for environmental hazards, and even calculated risks can turn fatal. It was July 22, 2018, when 27-year-old Cameron Blake arrived at a remote sandstone side canyon near Moab, Utah, ready to film a homemade zip line spanning approximately 220 feet across a canyon with a depth of roughly 120 feet. Cameron had built a modest following by documenting DIY outdoor projects and low-cost adventure setups that proved anyone could create their own backcountry thrills without expensive commercial operations. Cameron was enthusiastic and confident, priding himself on resourcefulness and self-reliance. He often downplayed risks in favor of making outdoor experiences accessible. Joining him were Rhea, a 29-year-old retail worker at an outdoor gear shop who was methodical and safety-conscious, and Trent, a 30-year-old hobbyist with some rigging experience who was overconfident and dismissive of redundancy protocols. A passing hiker in his mid-50s would later guide emergency responders. The temperature reached 91 degrees with only a light breeze. The sandstone edges showed visible weathering. The setup had not been professionally inspected, and no permit had been obtained. The gear consisted of an 11mm static line tensioned with a progress capture device, 2 webbing anchors with minimal edge protection, a steel trolley with a single attachment eye, a seat harness, and a single lanyard clipped using a non-locking carabiner. Static lines like that aren't designed to absorb dynamic shock loads, a dangerous oversight when used for human suspension. There was no backup attachment or secondary safety system. Rhea flagged multiple concerns during setup. She noticed a misthreaded harness strap and suggested adding a second anchor point for redundancy. Trent retightened the strap and dismissed the suggestion, insisting it would take too much time. The only test conducted was a single run using a 25-pound bag. No dynamic load test with human weight was performed. Cameras were positioned on both canyon rims. Cameron clipped his lanyard to the trolley eye using the non-locking carabiner with the gate facing outward. No tether keeper or secondary connector was used. He launched himself with a strong push. At midspan, the trolley hit a rough rope section, inducing oscillation and rotation. The non-locking carabiner rotated against the trolley eye. Under combined forces, the gate experienced flutter and levered open. Within seconds, the connector unclipped completely. The single-point attachment failed. Cameron fell approximately 110 to 120 feet to the canyon floor, impacting on sloped talus. There was no purposeful movement afterward. Rhea immediately called emergency services and relayed GPS coordinates. Trent stood frozen at the rim. The passing hiker quickly moved to guide responders. Rhea descended partway down a steep trail. When she reached a vantage point, she checked for breathing and pulse but detected neither. She marked the location with a bright sling. Search and rescue personnel arrived, documented the open non-locking carabiner and single-point failure, and conducted recovery using a litter and haul system. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be multiple blunt force injuries from a fall after single-point detachment. The Land Management Agency issued a statement warning against unpermitted rigging, non-locking connectors in life support applications, and single-point attachment systems, emphasizing the importance of redundancy and proper edge protection. Rhea completed a formal rigging course and published a detailed pre-launch checklist. Trent stopped posting rigging content. A caution tag was installed at the trailhead referencing redundancy and locking connectors. Local search and rescue teams incorporated details into backcountry safety presentations. Cameron's death became a stark reminder that cutting corners on safety can have irreversible and fatal consequences. It was January 16, 2016, when 25-year-old Molly Patterson decided to livestream what she called the ultimate winter hot tub experience. From her residential garage in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Molly had built a following by documenting creative DIY projects and unconventional lifestyle content. This evening, with temperatures at 19 degrees Fahrenheit, she planned to fill the bed of her pickup truck with water, heat it using a portable generator-powered pool heater, and stream the setup in real time. Molly was creative and spontaneous, prioritizing visual spectacle over logistical planning. Joining her were Danny, a 23-year-old neighbor who was practical, and Colin, a 25-year-old audio technician focused on production quality. The single-car garage measured approximately 240 square feet. Colin suggested closing the garage door completely to eliminate street noise and preserve warmth. Danny had mentioned noticing fumes when small engines were run in enclosed spaces, but the decision was made to prioritize audio clarity over ventilation. The setup included a 5,000-watt portable gasoline generator on the garage floor, a rubber hose running to a pool heater, multiple camera lights, and an electric space heater. Critically, there was no carbon monoxide alarm installed. During a test run earlier, Molly had mentioned noticing fumes, but treated it as a minor inconvenience. The live stream began in the early evening. The generator started, the truck bed began filling, and the camera lights created a warm glow. The door remained fully closed. No visible smoke appeared, but a faint shimmer in the light beams hinted at exhaust accumulating near the ceiling. Unnoticed as Molly adjusted a light stand and continued narrating. As time passed, Molly's movements slowed noticeably. She leaned heavily on the truck rail, and her speech became slurred. Mid-sentence, her words stopped entirely. She sat down on a step stool, then slid to the garage floor. Shallow breathing was visible on camera, but she made no attempt to stand. The live stream chat filled with concerned comments about air quality. Colin re-entered the garage to adjust a microphone. Almost immediately, he appeared unsteady. Recognizing something was wrong, he cracked the side door partway before stepping outside. Danny arrived shortly after, saw the haze through a window, and immediately opened the side door fully. She dragged Molly toward the threshold and hit the generator kill switch. Emergency services were called immediately. The dispatcher instructed moving all occupants outside and ventilating the space. Paramedics arrived and found Molly unresponsive with no spontaneous respirations. High-flow oxygen was applied. A cardiac monitor showed pulseless electrical activity. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation was initiated and continued during transport. Despite aggressive resuscitation, Molly was pronounced deceased at the hospital. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be carbon monoxide poisoning from generator exhaust in an enclosed space. Fire department personnel estimated carbon monoxide levels had exceeded 1,200 parts per million, a rapidly fatal concentration. The landlord installed hardwired carbon monoxide detectors and distributed flyers warning against running gasoline generators indoors. Colin recovered after oxygen therapy and posted a safety summary emphasizing the invisible nature of carbon monoxide. A local community center hosted a winter safety session referencing the incident. Molly's death became a sobering reminder that no content is worth risking lives, and that some dangers are silent, invisible, and absolutely unforgiving. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.